Hello, everyone. Welcome to the launch of our first Cambridge Laser. It is wonderful to have you all here. A great pleasure. And we have a fabulous lineup for you. I would like to introduce, to start us off, Stephen Connor, who is the director of CRASH, the Center for Research in the Arts, Social Sciences and Humanities. Steve himself wears two hats. He's a professor in English, in the English faculty, but he's also an amazing director of this wonderful center that we have here in Cambridge, which is essentially deeply interdisciplinary. And it is very apt that we have support of CRASH. Steve, I will pass over to you.
Thank you, Satinder. I just want to say a few words about CRASH and CRASH's involvement with this project and our interest in the relations between arts and sciences before just giving you a sort of roadmap of the evening and handing over to Harriet Loffler. CRASH, the Center for Research in Arts, Social Sciences and Humanities, is a research institute that's been operating in Cambridge since 2001. I've been its director since 2018. A core part of our purpose in Cambridge and beyond has been to foster research and academic collaborations across different disciplines and subject areas. We aim to provide stimulus and opportunity for kinds of inquiry that couldn't easily take place elsewhere in Cambridge. And during our first couple of decades, the focus was very much on creating conversations within the arts, humanities, and social sciences. I've tried to make it a new priority during my time as director to expand our field of interlocutors by facilitating encounters and framing shared inquiries between the sciences and the humanities. I've always actually felt that we in the humanities should see it as a positive advantage rather than any kind of constraint or difficulty to be in what has a claim to be the leading science university in Europe. Now, the division between science and the arts and humanities is, like many things in the academic landscape, a relatively recent thing. And the things called disciplines are not just things we do, they have become, but again quite recently, ways of defining the kinds of people we take ourselves to be. That wasn't always the case. Maybe disciplines are not the problem we take them to be sometimes, so much as the habit people have of wanting to personify disciplines. Take the word scientist. And though the word science has been around for a very long time in English and even longer, of course, in Latin, the word scientist is a much more recent arrival. And as a matter of fact, Cambridge had quite a lot to do with that. You could take somebody like William Whewell, for example, who as a student here in the 1820s won the Chancellor's Gold Medal for poetry and then graduated as second wrangler in mathematics. He was in turn professor of mineralogy and then the Knightbridge Professor of Moral Theology and Casuistical Divinity before becoming Master of Trinity. And he seems to have come up with the word we use for somebody who devotes themselves to scientific investigation at a meeting in 1834 of the British Association for the Advancement of Science in Free School Lane, where the Whipple Museum in Cambridge currently resides. This is how he describes the discussion. We thought that philosophers was too wide and too lofty a term. Savants was rather assuming. And then some ingenious gentleman, it was Whewell himself, in fact, some ingenious gentleman proposed that by analogy with artist, they might form scientist, and added that there could be no scruple in making free with this termination when we have such words as economist and atheist. But this term proved not generally palatable. Whewell even proposed as an equivalent to the German Naturforscher the phrase nature poker, and that never caught on either. And he was still niggling at this subject 6 years later, in 1840, when the word scientist had still not caught on. We need, he wrote, very much a name to describe a cultivator of science in general. I should incline to call him a scientist. Thus, we might say, as an artist is a musician, painter, or poet, a scientist is a mathematician, physicist, or naturalist. So, the notion of a scientist is formed, in fact, on the model of the thing called an artist. We speak a lot about interdisciplinarity nowadays, mostly, almost entirely, approvingly. Indeed, where you once went out on a limb by being interdisciplinary, it's now academic career suicide not to parade your interdisciplinary credentials. Now, I think there is a very great deal to be said for convergence and looking at the things that might be shared and shareable between the creatures we've learned to call scientists, artists, and, well, humanists won't quite do in the UK, although it's common parlance in the US. But I do think there are limits to this Pollyanna-ish, why can't we all just get along point of view. And I would hope that the kind of work that Crash will encourage might help us to be more honest, adventurous, and unintimidated about some of the points of fissure and friction between the arts and the humanities. And this might enable us to scrutinize some of the concepts and values, concepts like art or creativity themselves, that we might otherwise regard as self-evident or unnegotiable, along with the forms of professional identity and fantasy identifications founded upon them. We may in the process get more of a feel for the internal fault lines within as well as between the two cultures of art and science. I set up the first collaboration back in the early 2000s there had ever been between Tate Modern and the Science Museum, which was a conference on the two cultures. And we were discussing speakers, and I proposed the mathematician Marcus du Sautoy, successor to Richard Dawkins as Professor of the Public Understanding of Science at Oxford. There was a pause, and then a voice from the Science Museum said, could we maybe think of asking a scientist? So one of the things I look forward to from these laser talks is an opportunity to find out if we know what, if anything, it means to call yourself an artist or a scientist. So that's all from me. I'm just about, as I said, to hand over to Harriet Loffler, who will introduce the New Hall art collection in Murray Edwards. She will in turn continue the pass the parcel by handing back to Satinder Gill, who'll say a little bit more about this event and its background. We then have 4 speakers, each of whom will speak for 15 minutes, which will take us through to 1925 precisely, at which point there will be some panel questions from the panel, after which we will open up for Q&A from all of you. So now let me pass over to Harriet Loffler.
Thank you so much, Steve. What a fantastic sort of entry to this event, and I'm really delighted to be co-hosting this event with the wonderful Satinder Gill. And this event, in fact, was a kind of postponed event. It was meant to take place in March and at Murray Edwards College. So in my short presentation, I'm going to try and bring you something of the college and the collection to wherever you are. So let's share my screen and start from the beginning. So what is the New Hall Art Collection? Well, it's a permanent collection of modern and contemporary art by women at Murray Edwards College, which is part of the University of Cambridge. It's the largest collection of art by women in Europe and the second largest collection in the world. It was started by women, celebrates art made by women in a Cambridge college dedicated to the education of outstanding young women. So it was established as New Hall in 1954 and changed its name in 2008. by Dame Rosemary Murray. So the new name is Rosemary Murray and Edwards, the family that generously endowed the college. When Cambridge had the lowest proportion of female undergraduates of any university in the UK. And as the college needed to expand, Dame Rosemary Murray was completely inspired in her choice of architects. So she appointed Chamberlain Bonham Powell, who went on to build the Barbican in London, and who kind of made this kind of incredible brutalist building in the early 60s. And for them, this building was very much based around a manifesto for the education of women. Excuse me. So when you visit, which I all hope you'll do wherever you are at some point when we reopen to the public, you will see that there is this huge emphasis on height and ascension. And this is a photograph of the very iconic dome. And the idea was very much to encourage the students to always look up and thereby aim high. And the collection is absolutely everywhere. We have over 500 works, and you will see it in the dining hall, in the accommodation blocks, in the staff offices. So very much wherever you are in the college, you will be surrounded by brilliant art made by women. And this is a photograph of the dining room. And in the kind of distance, you can see this monochrome work by Mary Kelly, which was very much the kind of nucleus work of the collection. Very important American feminist artist. She came in 1985 to be the first artist in residence at Newhall and nearby Kettle's Yard, and made this series of work. And that kind of kick-started the collection. And the then president Valerie Pearl, along with the curator Anne Jones, set about building the collection, and as a way to very much kind of inspire the women studying. And they set about inviting 100 artists to donate work to the collection, thinking they get about 25. They got a staggering 75 donations by artists. And this was such a kind of extraordinary moment of collective giving, but it also is symbolic of a time when women artists we know were largely kind of overlooked by museums and galleries at that time. And included in the artists are Maud Salter, Lubaina Himid, Paula Rago, Mackie Hambling. I literally could go on for a long time. But I wanted to sort of mention the gardens because they are incredible. And I often describe Murray Edwards as my sort of utopia, because there is this incredible spirit of generosity, which is, in my view, comes very much from the head gardener, Jo Cobb. She allows the staff and students to pick the flowers and the fruit and the foliage from the gardens. And I think this generosity runs through the fact that all the works have been donated, and indeed that we're open to the public. So when there is not a pandemic, we are very, very welcoming of visitors, which is not necessarily the kind of welcome you get in the traditional Cambridge colleges. Very often you'll see a big sign saying closed to visitors. And so I think we are incredibly unique in that sense. And to sort of bring it back to the theme, really, and the nature of this event. So the college is interdisciplinary. We have students studying all sorts of subjects, all sorts of fellows from different kind of research fields. And we recently did an exhibition of photographs by Anne-Catherine Purkis that brought together portraits of women scientists and artists. And for me, it really demonstrated the parallels between art and science. And all of the photographs were taken in the spaces where people work. So you can see the laboratory and the studio was sort of shown side by side. And I really feel that through these photographs, it showed that these are very kindred spaces, that they are test sites for experimentation and discovery to kind of better explore the world and understand the world around us. I also think there's this lovely aspect of looking. So we see Julia Ball with her canvas right in front of her, and we see this idea of kind of looking down kind of through a microscope. And of course, it's the place where things get discarded, as you can see in this brilliant image by Sandra Blow with all of these sort of scattered pieces on the floor. And I think that kind of that failure, or that sense of trying things out and things not necessarily always going to plan, is something very true of artists. So I wanted to just end with this fabulous painting by Susan Treister, who's a British conceptual artist who very much in the early 90s began using emerging digital technologies as artistic material. And in 1991, she purchased an Amiga computer and began creating kind of fictional video game stills using the Deluxe Paint 2 software. And you can see her painting here is kind of made up of these repeated abstract brushstrokes. And when viewed from further away, looks very much like a kind of optical illusion. And a sort of pixelated effect, which was she was achieving through these kind of using the dots with the paint software. So for me, I can really think of no better way to, or no better statement than discover the secrets of the universe as we embark or kind of a venture into a discussion about art and science. Thank you. Now handing over to Satinder to take the baton.
Thank you very much, Harriet. That was wonderful. And it's great to see these photographs of the situation and the context in which we practice. And rather wonderful. I was just reflecting on the story of the origins of the laser talks. And in the story, it begins with the aeronautical engineer, the rocket scientist, Frank Molina, coming to Paris in 1947, invited by Aldous Huxley, the writer and philosopher, to create a science program with the UN's Education, Science and Culture program. And how by 1953, he began a new life as an artist, bringing together his science, his scientific experience with his artistic sense, exploring a new art form, kinetic art, exploring color, light and movement, and went on to then form the Leonardo Journal to give a platform for arts and science. Steve mentioned the two cultures, and obviously Molina was here in Europe at the time when the Reed Lectures by Charles Peirce Snow, with the publication of Two Cultures, threw up this debate on whether humanities and sciences are separate. And I was thinking about Frank Molina and his artistic sensibility, the synthesis of art with science. And it brought to mind another wonderful engineer and a mentor who passed away recently. He said that engineering is an art. He was a brilliant orator, and his quotations remain as etched experiences in memory. And I just want to share a couple because they're very apt for our discussion today. In his seminal book, he opens with a quotation. He says, "The bee puts to shame many an architect in the construction of its cells. But what distinguishes the worst of architects from the best of bees is namely that the architect constructs in his imagination that which he will ultimately erect in reality. And at the end of every labor process, we get that which existed in the consciousness of the laborer at its commencement." And it's such an important quotation. We all have imagination, whether we're a parent, a teacher, a neuroscientist, a nurse, a bus driver, a doctor, etc., and our imagination is embodied. The second quotation you often used to say was by Einstein. It's a famous one. Einstein said, "Imagination is far more important than knowledge, and that the mere formulation of the problem is far more important than the solution." And he himself, this very special engineer called Mike Cooley, said, "I hold that we have been asking the wrong questions, and therefore we have come up with the wrong answers." So what questions should and could we be asking? And I'd like to end my homage to him with a third and last quotation that I was very fond of hearing him say. It's by Leonardo da Vinci. "They will say that not having learning, I will not properly speak of that which I wish to elucidate, but they do not know that my subjects are to be better illustrated from experience than by yet more words. Experience has been the mistress of all those who wrote well, and thus as mistress, I will cite her in all cases." And centuries later, the scientist Michael Polanyi coined the concept tacit knowledge in the 1960s that basically expresses that knowledge is experiential and embodied. And to reflect on imagination and experience in the body is quite pertinent. Last year at the V&A, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, they held a conference on the future of crafts and craft knowledge in the face of a digital world. And on the very same days, unbeknownst to us until really late, here in Cambridge, we held a conference on tacit engagement in the digital age, both recognizing the importance of how the arts and sciences together may inform and shape futures of engagement and knowledge. And today, artists and scientists and technologists continue to question this separation. I thought Steve's point was really interesting, that where are the limits? And today, so many of us are addressing the separation, also relation, in order to address the societal concerns of our times, such as our environment, climate change, the future of urban life, creating alternative economics, and shaping technological futures. And the questioning continues precisely because this distinction is still propagated in our institutions, as Stephen so beautifully described. And perhaps, as he says, this is more a matter of habitus and who we think, how we see ourselves. And there is change afoot. You know, in our 800-year celebrations, the university's motto was art and science. And within the university and the city, including our own city council and our sister university, Anglia Ruskin, we have a growing art and science community asking questions. The Cambridge Laser is joining this arena, and it's questioning the separation and propagation of art as distinct and science as distinct categories of knowing and being. So we will host case studies and we'll ask questions such as, what is creativity in science and the arts? What is experimental practice in art, science, or philosophy? And how do scientists or artistic attitudes, inquiries, and methods essentially differ from one another? I was speaking with Xia Wei, who's joining us today as one of our guest panelists. And he told me of his conversation with the choreographer, Michael Montanaro, who only considers a work to exist when it has been performed in front of an audience. And that's interesting. You know, how do we disseminate what we do? How do we disseminate the products of our creativity in the world? Publications, exhibiting objects, live performances, a heightened form of live experience, and who recognizes this work? When does it exist? These are just some of the questions that this exciting series is going to reflect upon, addressing the intersections of art, science, technology, and society in relation to our historical past, investigating our current times, and experimentally envisioning our technological, urban, and environmental futures. This first laser is an introduction from us, and each future laser will be thematic in nature. And it's apt that we launch with this first laser with the first Art and Science Festival by an amazing collective, Suratomica, in Bogotá, Colombia. Suratomica's mission is to create more open and equitable social structures, new forms of organization, and alternative ideas about development. And their co-director, Daniela, Brill Estrada, is with us today. So along with Daniela, we're joined by a wonderful all-women panel of pioneers and leaders in the art, science, and technology nexus. And we have taken the opportunity to invite guest panelists to respond and ask questions before we open the floor to the audience. We will be paying attention to your questions and chat and reflections. We encourage you to write in the chat, and we'll select from these, asking people to unmute and present their question verbally, saying who you are. For those who are joining us on YouTube, we will do our best to engage you. We ask you to raise any question reflections in the comments, and we will be looking back at the Zoom chat and YouTube comments afterwards, and writing to those of you who've registered with us. I would now like to introduce our first panelist. It's a great pleasure for me to have Caroline Nevejan here. Caroline is Professor of Urban Design at the University of Amsterdam and is Chief Science Officer of the City of Amsterdam. It's an amazing position. She bridges academia, policymakers, and the city. She's also a researcher and designer in emerging network society and digital culture, advising national European policymakers. And very specially, she's been asked to orchestrate a complementary research program of the Dutch contribution to the 17th Architecture Biennale of Venice. And in times of the corona pandemic, this series of cahiers addresses values for survival. In times of unforeseen global changes, the need for sharing values to inspire individual and collective behavior is really urgent. And you can download the Values for Survival cahier from her website. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you very much, Satinder. Thank you very much, Laser, Leonardo. Thank you, all friends, to be here on the screen. It's very special to have this very nice reflective evening. For me, it's evening. I think for Daniela, for you, it's probably afternoon. But for us, it's evening, and it's very, what a treat, even though we live in COVID time, that we get some time to spend together and think about what we're doing. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And I thought I'll share with you, I think I'll share also because of the nice references to my coulis. I think I start with the end of my presentation. It's always nice to change your plan last moment. And I'll show you this piece of work and I'll tell you later what it is.
Our design process was organic. With every weekly meeting, the concept became more defined. Huda and Gaber's initial idea was to create an asemic or non-verbal responsive script. When Michelle joined the team, sound became a fundamental component of this script. Following discussions on relevant themes, Fantina and Marta joined the team and shared their recordings of the sounds of the Venice Lagoon. Michelle then started experimenting with the recordings to create alien and imaginary sounds. Then Gaber used Michelle's sound data to create algorithms that control and define a virtual amphibious world. In parallel, Huda conducted a research on fictional and conceptual scripts. All the while, there was a regular dialogue between the team members and a back and forth exchange of ideas and materials. In this presentation, we share with you our process and resulting prototypes.
Nothing more. Oh. Okay, stop sharing screen. Oh, where's my stop sharing screen here? Do you see me? Yeah, you see me now. Yeah, you see me. You see yourself now. Oh, I can do like this. That's funny. Now I point me. Can I do that? No. Pin video. Yeah, here I am. Do you hear me? I need some feedback? Yes, you hear me. Okay. Well, this is a project that is the. Oh, sorry, it goes on. It's very nice. Sorry. So, just find you again. Sorry. There you are. Yeah. So this project is the latest project that I'm just so happy that it happened. Being confronted with the COVID pandemic, I had to change the whole research program that what originally was going to happen in Venice. We were going to use the Biennale as a learning environment for civil servants, for students, for people from NGOs, from companies, to really think about how will we live together, given the fact that we have climate change as a very important issue that we have sort of 10 years if you don't want to get into very big trouble. And that all had to change. And then I come from a performance background. I worked for a long time in Paradiso, music hall in Amsterdam, with performing arts labs in London. And we did so many online concerts and many online orchestrations. And I thought, you know, it's possible to do it. So what we did is that together with We Are Here Venice, which is a NGO that lives in Venice, we started this research program. Oh, sorry, I need to have which one? I need this one. Yeah, this one here. We started a research program where we invited 50 people. Always one person from Venice was in the team, and then there were people from Berlin, Paris, Amsterdam, other cities. Here you see all the names of all the tracks. And every track started to work in an online environment. People that don't know each other, artists, scientists, civil servants, they didn't know, and they had the one big challenge that we put to them within 2.5 months, please create new work together and identify in doing this work, which value for survival was very important to you. So people were embarking on the work together, and by analyzing and reflecting upon the work that they were doing, they came up with the values they share. Previous work of mine, I did my dissertation on presence and the design of trust. Oh, wrong sort of thing. I should stop this thingy. Can do that easily. So this presence and the design of trust. I argue that it's not possible that when you think of ethical things, people need to be in real life together. So if you want to really make breakthroughs and understand new things, you have to be together. But given the fact that we are in COVID time, it was not possible to be together. So is it possible when we make these groups of very diverse teams in scale, in age, in where they live, in how they live, to come up with new work, to decide together what is good to do, and then also find out how to do it. And what was very interesting is that we found that all 12 teams were successful. I had anticipated that maybe, you know, half of them would not manage there. And I was also thinking that my own work would be, you know, I would still be right. But I found that when you need to work together, people find ways to do it. Then we go beyond language. Whether you are a scientist or an artist or a civil servant or a social worker. There's a beautiful project, Vanishing Homelands. Where are they? Here they are. It's a project about the people who live in Venice and who come from Bangladesh. And already once before they were flooded, you know, here in Jodhpur in Bangladesh, the people were flooded. So they were climate refugees coming to Venice. And in Venice, they were flooded again. But also we found that families in Venice have been flooded several times. So by working between art and science, like the film you saw, these were climate scientists, two young ladies, Fantina and Madrilena, and they were capable of identifying the sounds of the fish under the sea. That then went to the, like you heard, to the composer, and from the composer to the virtual environment creator with the algorithms, and then it went to Huda, who makes scripts. So because we combine art and science, and because we don't think about the difference, we just work on something somewhere else, you know? It's about the third point. I'm not interested what the nature is of science or the nature of the arts. I'm interested in what we can do together. And I find in my life that I've been doing this for 30 years now, it's so worthwhile. And also I think we can build the tools to do so. So I also want to show you, I have like 5 minutes left, Satinder, is that correct? Or am I out of time? Satinder? No, nobody.
I confess I took my eye off the clock. Yes,
Okay.
Have a little bit longer, Caro. Yes, okay. Yeah.
I just want to show you another project. So this exploratorium, it will be published in a month or so. You can already go to openresearch.amsterdam. I'll put it in the chat in a bit. You can see some of these projects already, where we just find that by being in a pressure cooker, people can manage to work together. And one of the methodologies they used is that they send bits of creative expression to each other. So a little bit of sound and a little image and a drawing. And by using our creativity, we can actually overcome this barrier of the screen. And people found ways to trust. I work with Jane Damosta from We Are in Venice now for over half a year, every day, and we have never met. So it's quite amazing that creativity is not only at the root of art and science, it's actually of the root of our own beings. And here I wanted to show you, maybe to end with, the City Rhythm project. We're still working on this, where we worked with tabla player Sirish Kumar Manji, and we also were very nice at the Centre for Music and Science in Cambridge.
Caro, can I just interrupt? Sorry, 1 moment, I apologize. Just to share your screen. Did you want to share your screen? No, we haven't been able to see the images.
Oh, I thought you, that's terrible.
I should have interrupted you earlier. I just wasn't sure, but now you're very clearly asking us to.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Something. No, not to worry. It would be great to see the image now. It'd be awesome.
So you see it now? You didn't see any images. Oh my God, you did see the film, right?
No, we missed that too. We heard it though. It was amazing to hear.
You didn't see the film?
Sadly, no.
Why did you not stop me? Okay, well, this is very interesting, you know, this is about what we are doing. So apparently there is a sort of audience fourth wall now operating here on the screen that no one told me that you couldn't see my images. That's very interesting because in a theater you don't stand up. But here we are on a screen. It's very important that people interrupt each other when necessary because I have no other feedback than your sound. What do I do now? Okay. Well, I'll just finish the story. It's very much of a pity. This is also a very nice story. When we work with Sirish Kumamanji, who's a tabla player. This is the tabla, which is an Indian musical instrument invented in the 19th century, but it works with rhythms that are very old. And with a tabla player, we did the research in like, what is rhythm? And he visualized different meters. And then we also brought the computer scientists with the tabla player to learn about the rhythms. And then we learned about the rhythms. We were capable of making an algorithm. And with this algorithm, we actually identified bass rhythms in cities. And now I'm so shocked that I don't know what else to do. I'm sorry. I'll stop screening, stop sharing. I'm back. I don't know, which image did you really miss? Then I'll give you one more, that's it. Big silence.
You could show us the video, maybe. I would love to see the video.
Yeah,
if we have time.
The video. Oh, I'm so happy. Yes.
I think it's worth showing that.
Thank you.
It's okay. We can take a bit more time. It was I think a lot of people wanted to see.
It's so a pity. Okay, where are we here? I'll go back. So what you see is that when we have these big projects, you can see that I'm tooling the projects, yeah? So we can easily work together and share how we work. And then people can also see each other's work, which is very important to us. That you can also see what others are doing. This is all open, yeah? You can just go there and see it. There it goes. Okay. Oh, you see it now? Hello?
No, not yet.
Oh my God, this is really stupid. Okay, share screen. There we go. Yeah? Do you see it now?
Not yet. Not yet.
We can hear it, but we can't see it.
Now you can see it.
Ah.
Okay, there you go. You can see it now? Can you see it? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. I'll do big screen, yeah? And I'll skip the...
Our design process was organic. With every weekly meeting, the concept became more defined. Huda and Gabber's initial
I just put this here. Go to the music.
materials. In this
There we go. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, that is wonderful. Thank you, Caro. Yes, apologies.
All the honor really goes to Huda Abifares, who's a scholar in script and a designer, to Mohamed Gawar, who's a virtual artist, to Michel Banabila, who's a composer, and to the two ocean scientists who made all the sounds of all the fish. And you can see it all on openresearch.amsterdam. I'll put the lines here.
Thank you, Caroline. That was wonderful. By the way, everybody loved hearing it on sound as well. So it was a bonus to actually see the video too. And I would now like to introduce our second panelist, Daniela Estrada. She's an artist and a physicist at the University for Applied Arts, Vienna, and creator and director of Quantico in Colombia, and co-director of Suratomica, who are organizing the first Art and Science Festival in Bogotá, Colombia, where we are honored to be hosted live today. In times of uncertainty and instability, in Colombia. It is striking that Suratomica believes that the relationship between art and science can shape new futures for equitable and sustainable society. Daniela, on to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
1 minute, please. Okay, I'm gonna share a screen. So please tell me if you can see it. Yes? Okay. So first of all, thank you for the introduction, and I'm super happy and excited that we're doing this Cambridge Laser Talk in collaboration somehow with the Suratomica Festival. We have been planning this for so long, and I'm super happy that it is happening now and that we can share this with everybody. I do have to correct you on one thing. I am not a physicist myself. I studied art. I am an artist, but I am really into physics, into particle physics mostly. And I have worked in collaboration with other types and other disciplines and other layers of science. So today I want to tell you, well, the talk you invited me to give is about creating new knowledge. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my way of creating new knowledge through the arts and through sciences or in collaboration with science. And then I will tell you a little bit like a small manifesto about it that was like coming out of my heart during the last few weeks working for the Suratomica Festival and in collaboration with amazing scientists in Bogotá and here in Vienna and so on. So I have shown this image in a lot of presentations, and it is one of my favorite machines in the whole world. I took this photograph the first time I went to CERN in 2016. I have been collaborating with CERN through the Art at CMS initiative, which is the art initiative and education and divulgation initiative from the CMS experiment at CERN, which is one of the biggest detectors of the LHC. And this picture is of the proton source. This is the machine that takes the hydrogen atom and breaks it to be able to send on the Large Hadron Collider only the protons. And I was super excited to see this machine because I was wondering for years about the origin of each element of the periodic table. So the first thing I asked when somebody showed me this machine was, okay, but where do you buy this hydrogen? I mean, where do you know the origin of this hydrogen? Because we know the cosmic origin of the hydrogen, but do you know where this one came from? And they told me, no, I mean, we don't know. We ordered it online. We don't know where it comes from. And for me, it was a big shock because I was kind of obsessing over the origin of each chemical element. So I started a research on hydrogen because it is also a big part of our human bodies. And so my question was, what is the difference between a hydrogen atom in this bottle and one hydrogen atom in my own human body? And then I developed a deeper research into every chemical element of my body. And the second element that I researched was carbon. And I did this art piece for the Cambridge Sci Art show a couple of years ago. I showed this piece at the Cavendish Laboratories in Cambridge. So I really wanted to show it here. And it was kind of a self-portrait of me in little bottles filled with carbon that it was according to the mass and the amount of carbon of each part of the human body. I fill the bottle with charcoal in this case, which is another type of carbon. Of course, it's not the same type of carbon that binds our compound molecules in the body or makes us alive. So this was one of the approaches. And then I went on and researched every chemical element in the periodic table. This was a project I did for an exhibition here in Vienna, and then I presented it also in Bogotá. and it was in collaboration with the Hubble Space Telescope, and it was curated by Ulrike Kuchner, who I see is in the chat, and I'm super excited that she's here as well. So I gathered a little piece of every chemical element that I could find, and I put it in a bottle, and on the bottle I wrote the cosmic origin of it. For example, here it's iron, and the form in which I was presenting it, which is here hematite, it's a mineral. And then it was like together, everything together. And this project was only possible because I was collaborating with not only Uli, who is an astrophysicist and an artist, but also mineralogy scientists from the Natural History Museum and other types of scientists. Of course, the physicist at CERN also helped me a lot to understand it. So then I started my master thesis, which was a collaboration with CERN. This is George Mickenberg from the Atlas experiment, and he was teaching me here the difference of the carbon atom in my body and the carbon atom in a stone. Or so he was telling me, this is not a part of physics, this is a part of biochemistry, which is completely something different. It is another level, another step of science. So what we do here is on the particle level, and what you are looking for is on the molecular level. And I thought to myself, I think I have the feeling that it has to be the same because it is one organism and it is one system. So I went into this research about what is the difference between these two atoms in my body, in a living matter and in non-living matter. And since I was not going to find the answers through physics experiments, because I tried it, I said, okay, one of my possible experiments would be to use the LHC and provide the hydrogen for a round. And then they laughed, of course, because this was almost impossible that they would allow me to use any machine at CERN. But it was funny asking for it to the scientists. In this photo, it's also Guadalupe Aldrete, who is a Mexican artist. I wanted to say her name because she's super present, and he was also telling us both about it. So then I started my own research about this topic. I decided to make my own experiments, and since I am an artist, I was using our materials, our artistic materials and tools, which was ink, water, and paper. So I knew the chemical composition of the ink, of the water, and of the paper, which was calcium carbonate and others, and the ink, which was also carbon and water and hydrogen and oxygen. So I was playing with all these chemical elements for the drawings. And what I came up with was this experiment to show that there is, according to my artistic and scientific research, a new fundamental force in nature, which we have not discovered yet. And I wrote the hypothesis about it with the help of the scientists. So I was using the scientific language, but I was writing a poetical hypothesis about a possible fundamental force that we have not discovered out of the arts. So I was an artist proposing a scientific theory. I showed this theory at the HEFI Institute here in Vienna last year. This is the Institute of High Energy Physics. And here in the people that you see are some physicists from the Institute. It was very cool to see how they responded to this artistic theory. And actually the best response was, it is possible that it exists. I mean, we don't know, we cannot tell you if it exists or not, but we're not going to prove it because we don't need that knowledge. We are looking for something else. So I started asking myself about new knowledge, which was the topic I was invited here to talk about today. And because we are now in the Suratomica festival, I wanted to tell you about this kind of thoughts and creative process to create new knowledge starting from the arts, and what I think about this creation of new knowledge. So the new knowledge being created today, and I think I am going to be a little bit contradictory to some of the things that have been said today, mostly at the beginning of the talk, because I have been having the feeling for the last 4 years that there is no frontier between art and science, that we really can just, that they split apart in some time in history, but it was this splitting of disciplines which is making this new this new knowledge is being made out of the conjunction of these disciplines. So new knowledge is for me curious, which is something we both share, artists and scientists. Everything comes out of a curiosity, a personal curiosity, and wanting to know more about the universe. So this is like the poetical part that we share. New knowledge is network-based and collaborative. And this is something really beautiful I heard some days ago in a talk by Carlos Maldonado, who is a Colombian scientist. No, I'm not going to say scientist. He's an investigator on complexity, on sciences of complexity. And he tells the story about the big science and the small science. And the small science used to be the one that was not network-based, which was this story that we know about this one genius, usually male, who goes into his office and alone and locks himself until he comes up with a new theory, and then he goes out of the office and gives it to the world. And nowadays, it is the big science or the new knowledge is created network-based. It is collaborative. There is no more one genius thinking about it and giving it to the rest of the world. It is the theoretical physicist telling the theories to the experimental physicist, so he can, it is a whole process and it is network. But this is also, these networks are also self-organized, which is important because I believe they don't depend on a structure anymore. I believe new knowledge is totally independent of academy or institutions or names, and it can be, for example, new knowledge is being created from the children telling their parents about it, or the patient telling the doctor about it. And so the knowledge is being created in every kind of way, not only one structure like a vertical structure. This new knowledge is also inter-trans multidisciplinary, however you want to call it. We have heard everything today, and in Suratomica, and talking about this, I have learned that it is even non-disciplinary. It is independent of the discipline. The discipline, the physicist, is no longer only a physicist because it is shifting this way of perceiving the categories of knowledge. And the physicist is also playing the piano to understand, and the artist is also cooking. And so it is not even academic disciplines, but every kind of creation process. So now we come to this complexity topic, which is super important for us. Because in complexity, we can study a system as a whole. We don't study the body, the human body that I was telling before in my own artistic investigations, as the lymph system and the cardiovascular system. We study it as a whole, and this brings new knowledge as one. And this is also a topic for us. New knowledge is queer. We were talking about it, and it is non-binary. With this, I mean, it stops being a binary system. It stops being dualistic. It stops being this or that and correct and wrong. It combines everything and crosses every kind of frontier, and is completely and absolutely limitless. It is not linear as well. And of course, as we see today, most through this pandemic, is that new knowledge is global. So it is created out of networks in a global scale. Suratomica became a global network. We are working with all continents, and we are working with scientists and with thinkers of every corner of the globe, which is amazing. And it is also important to create this new knowledge. It is also the idea of empathy, which is super important for this globalness and inclusivity and solidarity. And whatever you need and I have, I can give you to create this new knowledge. This is how everything looks together. I really like this picture, so I decided to put it here. And to say goodbye, I want to thank Satinder for also giving us the opportunity and for being part of this and for collaborating with us. It is for us super important and super nice to be part of this event. And I talk as us from the Suratomica network. And I'm super happy that we are now collaborating together and not only Cambridge University and Suratomica network, but it is crossing frontiers and limits and erasing limits between everything, even geographical ones right now. So that's all from my part. Thank you very much.
Daniela, thank you. That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much. I think I'm sorry that I'm just going through one talk, another talk, but we will be coming back to you with questions, and there's so much more to say. But that was wonderful. It gives me pleasure now to introduce our third panelist, Ghislaine Boddington. Ghislaine is a curator and director, and she specializes in the future human. Ghislaine directs the pioneering collective body data space, and she's a reader in digital immersion at Greenwich University. With a background in body technologies and performing arts, Ghislaine is a leading expert in telepresence and virtual physical blending. And for over 25 years, she's shared her future thinking in academia, business, creative industries, and cultural sectors worldwide. She was awarded the 9th Immersion Experience Visionary Pioneer Award in 2017 and keynotes internationally. And delightfully, she co-presents bi-weekly for the BBC World Service Digital Planet. She supports women and girls initiatives in technology as a trustee for the STEMETS and is spokesperson for Deutsche Bank Women Entrepreneur and Social Tech Initiative. So wonderful to have you with us, Ghislaine. She's going to speak to a very important aspects of our current and future times, the future body. Ghislaine.
Thank you, Satinder, and thank you to everyone, actually. I'm sure for us all, it's a relief, actually, a really special relief to talk through these topics, which are always in our minds, with such inspirational panelists and with some great attendees with us too. So I'm also going to share screen. So give me 1 minute and I will hopefully, this will happen fairly easily. And let me go to full screen. Is that working for everyone? Yeah, yes, lots of nodding heads. Great. And you can hear me too. Excellent. Great. So here we are actually in today in hugely unstable times. Very complex and risky scenarios are happening all around us, socially, politically, and economically. And actually, in reality, a universal change has taken place. And it's all due to this very fast and pretty much unforeseen pandemic that has crossed the world. I've been asked to approach tonight the futures of engagement from my own work side. And I will, first of all, tell you a little bit about my own work, but try and weave that in with some of the thinking onwards. So my work emerges from a performing arts training. I have a background in dance, and in the late 80s, I became kind of fascinated, passionately fascinated by the potentials of the then emergent digital technologies, particularly telepresence, motion capture, robotics, avatars, and avatar worlds, and their inherent reliance on our living bodies. And most of all, the potentials that they offered to co-create with us. Performing arts is actually at its baseline a collaborative form. You do rely on many others, both on stage but all around you, for anything to happen in that time-based environment. So this led me to direct and lead multiple labs, workshops and residencies across the 90s and into the early 2000s, all around the world, looking at the evolution of dance and the body alongside and integrated with our new emergent technologies. And parachuted me to 20 years later, today, to this work that I've been doing on what I call the Internet of Bodies, looking and exploring the future human, alive, connected and collective. And in particular today, and I'm sure it's completely obvious why, looking at body data and ethical futures, which has been in my mind and worrying me for a long time. Yeah. So I would like to work further with this. Ironically, this has come to the forefront very strongly at a mass level due to this terrible pandemic. And actually now we are in a point where our physical and virtual worlds are blending, and this is shifting our understanding of our identity, our collaborations and our innovations. And our bodies have become the interface. Now, I believe they should have always been the interface, but actually, finally, that is in the much bigger mass debate. And it's occurring all around us. And we definitely are now involved in quite a strong ethical interaction between our bodies, our datas, and our technologies. The focus of our work through Body Data Space, and I do work in collectives. Some of you will have remembered Shinkansen Collective, which started 89 to early 2000s, merged into Body Data Space Collective. Some of us have been working together 20 years or so. But our starting point really has been this hypersensory self, looking at liveness and virtual physical presence. And here, the transmission of data from our body outwards and translation backwards, as we know, not necessarily the same data. We can talk out and we can receive visuals back. We can touch and we can receive visuals back, whatever we do. My aim is to use digital connectivity to enhance knowledge exchange and cultural understandings across time and space, which is why a lot of my work has been and still is involved in telepresence and connected bodies. And the hypersensory is looking at these emerging energies and emerging possibilities from the physical self and the data self and the tethering of the two together, and how we start to see that in the world, which is fast coming now. We, of course, through this have very much explored digital intimacy, which is a key topic in our work. Teleintuition and virtual touch have been at the top of our agendas through all the labs. And we have brought together hundreds and hundreds of technologists, scientists of all types, sound artists, engineers, etc., with dance and body experts, yeah, with the intention, never having the intention, let me emphasize, just to debate and explain to each other what is the arts, what are sciences, what is technology, but actually to debate and apply our expertise to explore solutions to societal issues and to engage and experiment together and challenge each other. Now, this is a set of VR software programmers that we've been working with at SAT in Montreal, looking at collective embodiment. These are, of course, mainly guys, but great lot of guys actually making the code for spatial and physical computing. Many of them have not actually played within those generative spatial and computing spaces. So wonderful reaction, actually, and very positive onwards too for this. So the more experimental the environment, I believe, the more we are challenged. And the more we're challenged, the more radical we come in our outcomes. And I believe we really need this today. And that's going to be one of my key points. We can't wait anymore for this now. So I'm going to put forward a long-term belief of mine from working in collectives and working interdisciplinary, that interauthorship, the incredibly beautiful process of collaborating with other specialists in creation processes and looking at co-creation and interauthored results and outputs. Like Daniela, I don't believe that one person has an idea on their own. I think we need a lot more acknowledgement of the mixing of disciplines into authored outputs, and not just acknowledgement, we need more of it. Yeah, we seriously need more. So here we are with collective reality. And this is a piece we made in 2016, very much about experiencing togetherness. So coming together and interacting together. And here I just want to talk a little bit about the boundaries that we actually have set ourselves, boundaries between art and science and technology, and the stakeholders that keep those in place. Daniela talked about the history of this, and I think several other people mentioned it too. But even today, we can see all around us institutions of all types, academics, practitioners, politicians, for actually where it's better for them to keep these very separate disciplines in place. The boundaries are often reinforced by critics, journalists, by funders, by the curators who actually just want an author. They want one name and that is it. They don't want to acknowledge the mix of people around it. So, and we also play into that system. We also play in and back it up with hierarchical referencing, only valid when it's in written text form or data form, not valid if it is living time-based experiences, yeah? And we don't help ourselves or each other by doing this. Leads me to a whole set of theory I do around what I call the I-we syndrome and the confusion between the I and the we in collaboration processes and how those are referenced beyond those collaboration processes. But what this does not do is enable new knowledge creation in the best way possible. Oh, hang on a minute. Yeah, so here now, I'd like to just go back a little bit and look at the research we've been doing with internet of bodies and the data transmission that we've been doing from biosignals and biometrics from and to the body. And of course, this has opened up many ethical issues, the ethical use of data and particular personal data. And I bring right to the surface words now that we're hearing all around us all the time at a mass level, suddenly, particularly linked to the COVID lockdown, was coming for a while, but it is now in our faces. Privacy and surveillance and tracking, harvesting, fakes, profile targeting, push advertising, trolling, contact tracing, identity theft, data rights. These are all linked to the use of our personal data and the misuse of our personal data, mostly without our permission and mostly through government, corporate and policing measures, which is scraping off us all the time. And this, I believe, will be very affecting our understanding of identity, of selfhood, and our responsibility as individuals within the world today. As many positives as there are too. So this is just one example, body data space example. Everyone has their own vision of this, but of a personal data rights dashboard where we would control the settings, possibly with, in the future, with our own tethered AI, where data and biometrics is put into the middle and shared with others, but that you have the choice as an individual towards looking at the shared social good, putting that in anonymously or using it in your name and maybe getting financial return for some of the uses that happen of it. And this is exactly, I think, one of the most important parts of today's sort out of the world. We really do need to get there, and we can't get there unless we work in interdisciplinary groupings. To do this work, we need to work together. Diversity is key. It's absolutely important. The greater the range of backgrounds, the greater the range of diversity and inclusion, the more vibrant these solutions will be. And we will get innovation coming for all. We need intergenerational, we need intercultural, we need across all gender diversity of all types and many others that I won't go through in full-on detail. And this is where we will get to new networks of new knowledge, networks of new solutions through transparencies. So diversity in collaboration, I believe, is the only way today to create innovation. I don't think we go anywhere by just working in our little cliquey groups, patting each other on the back and telling each other how great we are in our tight little areas, yeah? This is challenging. It's quite frightening sometimes. It's difficult. Carolina talked about it, but results, as Carolina said, can be absolutely wonderful, what come out of these. And people grow through these experiments, and it's helping us with solutions. So what we really need is neurologists and choreographers and biologists and data scientists and behavioral scientists and sports people and physiologists and physiotherapists, all to be working together in this area, what I call the Internet of Bodies, to actually start to work towards collective embodiment, merging with collective intelligence, and hopefully towards more positive outcomes, very much needed in today's world. So I think I'll leave it there. My final slide actually is just about the virtual physical future of our presence and senses, which is what my Internet of Bodies work is around. And I think I've said this really, this urgent need for an ethical evolution and an interoperability between the STEAM, science, technology, artists, engineering and mathematics towards positive solutions for today's crises. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ghislaine. That was fabulous. Brilliant. Loads of food for thought. Lots of challenge. Wonderful. And last and far from least, I was delighted to introduce our last panelist, Pam Burnard. Pam is Professor of Arts, Creativities and Education at the University of Cambridge, and she's Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. She leads research in diverse, and I like this, she says, variegated creativities at the nexus of education, culture, and creative industries, and digital learning cultures and innovative practices. She's a champion of the arts and sciences. Pam is inspiring, and it's special to have her with us today. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you so much. It is inspiring to be here and to multitask while I speak to you. I just want to say, oh, you're getting a little taste of what's coming. I want to say, first of all, there's an Australian actually watching this at 4:15, Naomi. I'm so impressed. Thank you so much, everyone. Panelists are so inspiring, and the participants, and to Satinder and her team for bringing us together today for what I think is absolutely timely and an imperative to talk about. I'm bringing to you questions about education, and I'm going to be starting with this question of why creativity matters. But of course, before we look at that, we have to ask the question of what is creativity? Now, this could take hours, but I've only got 15 minutes. And we know that, you know, people like the amazing myths that we need to debunk again and again and again historically, where often, I'm sorry, composers, more often male, I'm sorry guys, will say it's all about freedom and constraints, and it's about the individual, and it's a disposition, you've got it or you haven't. Or you've got Keith Sawyer, who's a wonderful collective collaborator, I've written with him, who speaks about something very different, which is the idea of collaborative. We've heard inter-authorship, this collaborative idea of involving rules and conventions, and then a codified collaborative practice. Again, you're allowed in or you're not. And then we have people like Björk, you know, very contemporary artists who are working with different disciplines, bringing nature, culture together as one word, and engaging in transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary, non-disciplinary collectives. And of course, we have children, of course, who are the most inspiring of all, who bring to the mix, you know, look at this drawing. Is it a cyborg? Is it non-human, human? What is being communicated here? So what is creativity? What do you think it is? And I want to challenge what you think it is in terms of the very general way we say what creativity is. Is it about creating something new that's valued? Well, by whom? And is it about someone being the first to create something, or is it more likely, as we heard beautifully said, inter-authorship and collaboration? So my story starts as a musician. I've had 3 careers, embarking soon on a 4th. And essentially, I am a musician, worked in the creative industries, music industries, and then education, and now somehow found myself in higher education, surrounded by books. So how wonderful is that? But the key thing here is I was very interested in musical what makes someone creative in music. So I interviewed all these people, original bands, singer-songwriters, DJ cultures, composed musicians, improvisatory musicians, and of course, game designers, sound designers, and found that in more cases than none, they were transdisciplinary, not working just in music, but also possibly interdisciplinary. And what's the difference? You know, these musicians were not drawing and engaging on just one one discipline. They were actually not staying within one boundary, but working often, if it was transdisciplinary, integrating different disciplines and transcending traditional discipline boundaries, which we're seeing they are needing to do now because of this pandemic that's not going to go away, and that is translating into multiple creativities. And here is the rub, really, and that is that we have to think and offer a big, powerful corrective to when we say creativity, which creativity, whose, where, and to expand this concept so that we are very precise with the context, because there's forms of authoring. We heard tonight inter-authoring. I love that word. We're looking at mediating modalities. You know, this is about the temporality and the technology that is really changing and innovating where we are and what we do and how we do it. And then there's practice principles, said simply, implicit and explicit. This is the very simple model, of course, that translates into a book that looks like this, and that is being developed into and looking at other disciplines. And that leads me to this point. This is a recent book where authors were looking at reconfiguring what it means when we say STEAM for future making education. And this is where we get into this really, really interesting and quite sticky place where there's a lot of contentiousness about what is science in society, what is art in society. And I see the book by David Rothenberg, Survival of the Beautiful, Art, Science and Evolution, beautiful book. And he, 2011, and remember that this amazing thing called a smartphone had only been out for a while. Now this represents the meeting of art and science. And he said on page, wait for it, hold on, time is at pace, there is art and science. These are two forms of knowledge. There should be kept separate, like reason and faith. I could not disagree more. And so we say, when we look at what is STEAM and what is it when we bring together what we're calling transdisciplinarity, art and science, which could be conceived as STEAM-based education, where arts and science are not separate or even separable, but rather combine as transdisciplinary configurations. People in this book have been writing about, and here are some titles. A colleague wrote about why does science matter? What is specific to science creativities? Looking at decolonizing teacher education so that we can think more transdisciplinary, material enactments of mathematics and arts. What does that look like? Art, science, and quiet activism. Where does science end and where does art begin? And so looking at the really what we're calling post-human transdisciplinary pedagogies in education is seeking to bring forth collective and sustainable futures for young people. Let's have a look at this. This is actually a garden, a STEAM garden in Edinburgh, and it's a project with children explored what might be possible in the constrained space of their school ground, and also considered how to tackle the politics of space, but also engaging with real world problems and paying attention to the processes that take place in a garden. And I think we've all done this in the last 5 or 6 months when there was no sound of cars. We could just actually go into a garden, however tiny, and hear nature and engage with nature in a very close and personal way, that the ethics are entangled with aesthetic and relationality, and that the children are engaging in an experience of plurality, of connections being made outside in nature, where nature, culture are not two words, but one. Here is a young South African young man. He's 16, and I'll talk. I'm looking at the time, and I did write down how long I had, and I have till I think 7:35. Do I?
You have 7 minutes.
Thank you. Here, his words are on the right-hand side. This is a competition after a week of working with transdisciplinary pedagogues from South Africa and from Finland and across Europe and the UK, working together to have young people engage in a dialogue between disciplines. And this notion of transdisciplinarity exemplifies, I think, one of the historically important driving forces in the area of transdisciplinarity and this business of integration of knowledge. And what happens? What's new? What is this new knowledge that was spoken earlier so beautifully? What is the dialogue and the meeting place of these two disciplines? Transdisciplinarity has been described as a practice that transgresses and transcends disciplinary boundaries. So one is learning not just art, although that is amazing, but they're learning also maths, and they're seeing the art in the maths and the maths in the arts. And it seems to have this real potential to respond to demands and imperatives in a real world way. And so this sort of plural view of what can education look like. Now, at this point, I'm going to work a little bit of magic and show you some more of this work of these, was 200, oh, that's not the one, this is the one. And I'm assuming you can see this. So I'm going to just walk through these paintings, these pictures that the students in South Africa, in a range of secondary schools, were invited to enter a competition showing their maths knowledge and their arts knowledge and something about themselves as young.
Just lost you.
What do we see? Oh, your internet is unstable. Okay, let's just power on and say, if I keep on moving quickly, there could be a miracle and I could get to the first image. This was us as a team doing the usual quantitative dance of looking at the frequency of maths concepts and the frequency of arts concepts. And that said certain things, but really, the real understanding came when we looked at what the students said about their own work and doing a diffractive analysis of that work, asking questions and engaging with them. And so here is the team. I just show these brilliant people working together, this transdisciplinary research, transdisciplinary knowledge creation, collaborative inter-authorship is the way of the future for us to engage and move. I'm going to just now take this one down and bring back the other one just to see if I can work magic. Now you're seeing my drawers. It feels like you've just seen inside my, oh, that's not going to work. So I'm now going to stop sharing and end by saying, what does a diffractive analysis look like? What does it sound like when you actually look at the meeting of two worlds? When we looked, we saw, and you might remember at the beginning, I showed that the Vitruvian man that was drawn by a 15-year-old. And we were asking, his name is Jubilani, he's 15, in keeping with his ideas, you know, why did he choose to draw himself? Why is it a self-portrait? Why did he work with Leonardo's kind of image, you know, the Vitruvian man, and go beyond it, relating to mathematical knowings? And his image seemed to be screaming. He seemed to be stressed. And indeed, that the mathness and the artness meet, overlap, and interfere in a way, in such a way that creates new learning. And this is the way we're moving forward with creative ecologies, where schools become creative ecologies, where young people are invited to engage with sensory knowing, being, doing, becoming, and supporting their well-being through this making, the materiality of doing maths, of doing art together, and activating this art science activism, you know, transcends these authoring as young people, you know, as we see, you know, in creative industries all the time, with the collaborative teams that you see with multiple means of engagement and configurations that bring future making part of the knowledge. And so the key theme I'm saying is diverse creativities, multiple creativities, understanding where arts and science meet and change how we see what we know and how we do it. And this is the I, the we, and the us of future making. Thank you.
Dear Pam, thank you so much. That was brilliant.
Was that
a real
15
challenge
minutes?
For us to think.
Was that
Yes,
15? It feels like
that,
it may have been.
Yes, that was
3 hours.
Perfect timing. Perfect timing.
Time stops, temporality, spaces, they merge and blur. So the boundaries are completely blurred for all of us at this moment. Good.
No, thank you. That was just perfect. I would like to now invite our guest panelists. I haven't thought about the order of this, but maybe I could invite Xinwei to make some first reflections and questions. I should say that Xinwei is phenomenal. He's a mathematician, physicist, computer scientist, and artist and philosopher, a tour de force, and he is director of the Synthesis Lab at Arizona State University. I'll pass it over to you, Xinwei.
Can't hear you.
All right. Thanks to everyone. It's a privilege to be here. I'll be here, be with everyone. Maybe just to put some, to recap some of the really inspiring terms that's popped up. I mean, there's several. One of them is this question of creativity, I guess, and another that's implicit, perhaps, is this? Well, why do we even think of this as a value? Maybe we can come back and look at that, and how is that related to life, right? I mean, I think some people mentioned, Pam mentioned maybe the most creative people we have around us are our children. And another way to think about this is maybe how, in what sense are our children or any small creature, new creature, an instance of creativity, after all, right? So they're not just the products of our minds, just products of matter, in what sense? So maybe that's something that we could explore moving forward, is this question of creativity. But another way to think about that is maybe not so much to engage in it as an academic exercise, not only as an academic exercise, which we can do, but in practice, you know, how are people creative? What do people create? And then we can think about, well, I hear, I think in Daniela's characterization of creative practices, this beautiful notion of queering, how new knowledge queers, goes across boundaries, across agents, across actants in this way. I think that's really quite a beautiful way of putting it. That creativity maybe in general has this property of queering, going across schema, across boundaries, across categories. On the other hand, I'm an academic, and I'm trained in a classical way, conventional way, let's say. And I think there's a power to that. There's absolutely a power to that, institutional power. We say that, in the business world, in the world of animals and creatures, there is no discipline. There are no disciplines. There are bridges, there are beavers making beaver dams, etc. There are economies, you can even say that, but there are no disciplines. But inside the academy, in the university, there are disciplines, 1,000 years of the formation of disciplines, right? And more. And I want to respect that. I think this is part of the question that Steve started with us. Is that what does it mean to say that we are, maybe not to say that we're a linguist or a psychologist, but the practice of doing psychology, or the practice of doing algebraic geometry, the practice of doing history of music or ethnomusicology, they are highly disciplined practices, right? And there's power. And I, for one, would not want to cede that power, like the people at some other universities in America who say, well, we're anti-disciplinary. That's a different statement, right? So this is a tension. And I think this network can be really powerful if we actually work with that tension. So maybe one question I'd like to ask everyone here is two-part question is, do we have any initial responses to this question about how or why do we create when the we can be extended to be more than human? Okay, that's one question. And the second is play, right? And this is a question I proposed to Satinder that we come back to in maybe a subsequent session, which is this question. When you reach the limits of your method, okay, your method, whatever the methods are, okay, what do you do next?
Nice question. I like it. Very nice.
Yeah, it's a brilliant question.
Yeah, life takes over. I like it.
Can I turn over, Caroline, would you like to take up?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you hear me? Yeah. I think it's a brilliant question. What do you do when you reach the limit of your methods, and then what do you do next? I did it several times in my life. I changed course. It's great because you're young again. You're becoming like a child again. You have to be creative to survive in a new environment. So I like that question very much. But concerning the question of disciplinarity, I think without a discipline, you cannot enter into any transdisciplinary team. So I think because I have a strong discipline, I can also work with other disciplines. I think from having a discipline, you also, what you mentioned, the respect is very important. You have the respect for the tradition. You have the respect for the specific skill and the specific perspective. And because you are rather sure, or as much as you can be of a perspective, you can also open up to other perspectives. So like in the film I showed you, the ladies, dus Fantina Madrugada and Marta Pucciolini, they are deep water ocean scientists. They have never worked with artists before because they were so deeply into their profession. And then Michel is really a composer. He's very known as a composer. Now, it's like because you have your own discipline, I think you can talk about transdisciplinarity. So I fear that I have with the new knowledge that Daniela was referring to. Yes, things emerge in networks and between people, and I love the notion of collective embodiment and collective intelligence, but it's not that we sort of are not there anymore. So the more distinct you are, the more collective your intelligence can be. That would be my answer. So we need the disciplines and we need the body, which is distinct from someone else. So in the other, I meet me. I think these frontiers are important. That would be my first answer. I don't know what any of the others say.
I think for myself, having come through the New Dance Collective originally, actually, the first collective I was in, so the contact improvisation British-based one, very linked to Steve Paxton and all of the New York scene. What I learned with others there, not just on my own altogether, is that actually that 70s collective, earlier than 70s collective idea of non-hierarchical, everybody's the same, you know, disciplines don't matter, was not the way we work. So when we set up Body Data Space and Shinkansen originally, 1989, we set it up very clearly as specialists working within collective practice. So I've always looked to work collectively and collaboratively with the best in their discipline and the best experts out there, and to in a way it's that transdisciplinarity which is important in it. So
but the interesting thing is that what you said about creativity as a value, it's indeed very strange that we have not mentioned it as a value. Also, sort of creativity is locked to the arts and the culture scene, where it's in every profession important. Also, if you're a car mechanic or if you're a cook, I mean, creativity is like the source of life. And
I mean, I don't know if it's background or how you're educated, but I was never brought up to think that scientists weren't creative, or that, you know, the same as musicians or artists. So I think it's the context where you're coming from. And I think that often, I mean, personally, I believe everyone's creative. It's just actually how we bring that through in people and how we enable that. And a lot of that's to do with the early education system and holding on to the child within that's been mentioned. And a lot of it's to do with how we continue to allow our brains to flow and to process creatively, whatever our discipline is.
But in policy level, I also work in policy. Their creativity is really confined to culture and the arts, which is really a pity.
Yeah.
It should be get out. It should become a value. I agree very much with that.
Yeah.
May I? Yeah, I mean, in thinking that teachers should be letting arts and science teach together means that how we understand is not based on silos. I've done some research with a choreographer who works only in intercultural contexts and has become an activist for global warming and climate change. And she works purposefully with transdisciplinary and intercultural companies because it's a shared learning ecology. The learning ecologies, the tacit understandings become explicit in having to find a language that people can meet. We see transdisciplinary teams going to places like Tibet to create, and where engineers, architects, scientists, and artists are working how to develop systems so that if there is an earthquake, if there is a disaster, then the community can, at the local, can respond very quickly. And these are new forms of knowledge. You know, knowledge, we don't have answers. You know, these are new forms of knowledge that generate and diffract into new transdisciplinary practices and processes. I think I did a 4-year degree at a Bachelor of Music in a conservatoire, and I know there are still practices going on today that were going on then. And we seem to get stuck in a sort of historical kind of time, space, matter, sort of frozen space where the values, you know, that are not, and the mythologies are not being questioned and critiqued. I mean, decolonizing the curriculum is, you know, part of what I'm talking about here, and developing, you know, really relational, non-hierarchical, non-binarized, non-reductive, but actually opening up what is a discipline, what is it to be a musician, musicians are not even calling themselves musicians. They're often calling themselves sonic artists or artists or social entrepreneurs. Because the word musician as a professional musician, it's not enough. There are 4 types of careers. Last point, the usual portfolio, then protean. Portfolio means you play your instrument in different settings, but it's always that instrument. Protean means you still might be a music specialist, but you're actually transferring that knowledge into possibly sound engineering, possibly in the pit, on the stage, wherever, but in different settings, and transferring that knowledge. Then there's a boundaryless, where people are jumping fields, and taking that knowledge of music into maths or into, video gaming and so forth. And then the final is squiggly, which is, kind of why Gen seem to be project led, and they're kind of led where the jobs are, and if the jobs aren't there, they create new ones. Boom. So I think values are at the source of all of this, absolutely the source. And when you ask teachers, children, parents, creative industries, engineers, community people, are you creative? People really doubt, stop, hesitate. Are you a composer? Oh, we're all composers. I've just composed my book, behind those books are carefully composed in terms of the sequence, so the compositional elements, I think we've got to be really unpacking, critiquing, being very analytical in terms of not deconstructing to just be negative, but rather to not just be reactive but proactive, because education is so slow to react. Not at the moment. Look at us. Woo! Here we are. It's amazing. It's a wonderful sort of unexpected outcome from this horrid thing called a global pandemic, because people are going online, they're streaming, they're finding new ways to reach different audiences, and there is still massive inequalities. So there is one of our challenges. Now let's put our transdisciplinary hats together, bring those disciplines together, and think differently about, frugal creativity. Let's call it frugal creativity. It's a type of creativity where you haven't got many materials. Not my idea. It's all, we stand on the shoulders of many, and think differently about what we're doing. I'm sorry, I may have been speaking for 3 hours. I'm sorry, I'm on a horse. I'll sit back. I'll breathe.
No, that was brilliant, Pam. Thank you. No, it was a great discussion. Yeah, fabulous. I would like to, we have about 10 minutes left, and I would like to bring in Mary Simoni, who's joining us from the US. And then to ask Karanjit Gill to say some last comments and thoughts. Mary, can I bring you in, please?
Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this and to comment. I have many things I would like to say, and I know that our time is limited, but I would like to pick up on something that Ghislaine, Daniela, and Pam have really underscored, which are important to me, which is the importance of diversity and diversity of voice as we think about these self-organizing collectives and what that means for inclusion, and that as a catalyst then for discovery, innovation, and the formation of new knowledge, whether it be knowledge or cultural production. So the thing that I think about a lot in my role, both as a musician, broadly speaking, sonic artist, but also being responsible for a school that has many, many undergraduate and graduate curricula is what should we be doing? What is our responsibility to increase equitable access so that everyone can participate in these shared experiences? We are coming right here as a very privileged community today. There are many voices that are not represented. How do we continue to increase diversity?
No, thanks, Mary.
So everybody wants to talk at once.
No, it was great to have that reflection. I think, may I invite one of you to just say a few words in response to Mary? We have, that would be great.
I'm happy to come in. I'm completely with you, Mary, on everything you said. I've worked on diversity and inclusion all my life, partly just from really recognizing the advantages that I'd had, luckily, from being luckily born in a lucky place with lucky great parents. And, you know, it's just luck, yeah, where you're born and when, yes. So, and a belief that we are all creative, which actually came from my parents. So I have to, you know, again, a very positive thing. I think we're at a point in time where, and just to say actually first, in my curatorial work and in the choice of, you know, the probably be about 7,000 or 8,000 artists that I brought through these interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary workshops, I have always created a gender balance, always, you know, just absolutely stuck to it. And I've always looked for really the diversities, intercultural inputs we can have. Dance, it's very important, yeah, and as in music, yeah. So I think at this point in time, we have a massive job to do. And I think I hear this everywhere, and I keep saying it in my head and saying it to everyone else is, you know, it's no longer enough to be anti-racist or anti-sexist or anti this stuff. You've got to be actively anti this. And that means taking action every day. And it means taking action on everything you do. And it means being brave enough to pull other people up to and say, that's not okay, that joke. That's not okay to not have the mix there. I'm aware too that we are, you know, not an intercultural group, and we've got loads of women here, but still we're a privileged group, yeah. And it is incredibly complex for us to widen this access and these debates into a deeper and more fascinating group of people. I love my work with the STEMettes, for example, 6 to 19-year-olds, young girls and women from all different backgrounds, and we've just taken 4,500 through online STEMettes workshops. We went into 2 weeks after lockdown, and we've taken 4,500 of them through the last 20 weeks. It actually went really well. So
great, thank you, Ghislaine. I'm just going to I'd just like to bring Karamjit Gill to make a comment, and then we have a question from the audience.
Right. Well, there's a lot to take in. Collective intelligence and bodily movement and art and culture and theater and music and diversity. And then what came to me was really is respect of the boundaries and respect of the limit. Whatever we do, and how do we go beyond that? And what I find because being an editor of the journal, what I find is that thousands and thousands of AI researchers, they will talk about ethics as an intellectual exercise. Yeah. They will talk about the right about collective intelligence as an intellectual exercise, embodiment as an intellectual exercise. But when you ask a simple question, how do you contextualize at the place where you live, where you work? Can you cross the boundary of your university and meet the unemployed, meet the people with a handicap, meet the old people with dementia, meet those people who have no voice in the academic world, in the privileged world? What would you do? How do you cross the boundaries? And I don't get any answers. I can get references to number of papers people have written, number of books which is written. But what do you do? Very simple question. You get somebody working on breast cancer, write a paper, and what does the paper say? My algorithm is better than the others. When you write back, well, who says that? Have you worked with the people who suffer from breast cancer? Have you talked to them? Have you talked to the social workers, community workers, anybody? Have you ever thought about working with them, not on them? Have you ever worked to collaborate with them in the sense that they design together, they evaluate together, then you have the feedback together? You don't get any answers because the whole intellectual exercise has been about articulation, dissemination, articulation, feedback, dissemination. So that is what concerns me, that how do you cross your own boundaries, how you respect other people's boundaries, how you cross your own limit, how you actually be hospitable to other boundaries. And I think the artists and you people have a lot to offer. And the question to me is, how do you use your framework of collaboration, collective intelligence, collective embodiment, to actually reach out to the scientists and engage them to understand you? There you go.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Karamjit. Lots of wise food for thought and very challenging for us. I would like to, because we have just a short amount of time, I would like to bring in one member from our audience, Naomi McCarthy. Chryssie?
There she comes.
Good.
I think the you're mentioning me because early on I posted the question, but it was so that Caroline's video.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. There was a confusion there. In that case, can we have a response to Karamjit's reflection?
I like to do that.
Panel? Yeah.
But maybe Daniela, you go first. That would be nice.
Well, I was just thinking of something in like that crossed my mind through all three questions that were asked, and I think that is exactly what I was talking about through in this presentation about new knowledge and about the limits and about the frontiers and about this a kind of restructuring of the knowledge. I am not against disciplines. I think maybe it was understood wrong because I used the word non-disciplinary, but I was saying it goes beyond that. It goes beyond what we were talking about right now. It goes beyond being the doctor and being specialized in breast cancer, for example. That was the example, but going to the people and independent or non-dependent of the discipline, that the knowledge is created because there is a patient and because there is a person who is suffering this disease. And it is the same throughout society and throughout this network of knowledge creation. So in our case, to answer exactly your question, we have been able to see that there is a big interest and curiosity. That's why I put this also on the first layer of new knowledge being created, coming from all sides of knowledge, from all disciplines. And I am the reason I really want to put this word discipline in parentheses is because there is people, the most of the world who is not this group that is here is not belonging to a discipline. We are talking about Suratómica. It means south. It means that we are talking about the global south, the part of the world that does not have a discipline but has so much knowledge to give. So we get close to that society, and we get close to those communities and to the people, and that's where the knowledge is created, and everything sprouts out of the connection. Yes, maybe this discipline thing was something I was misunderstood, but that is exactly what I was talking about.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
We are actually over time, but I think that as long as they don't cut us off, for those who would like to talk for just a few more minutes, I think we might be able to get away with it. Pam.
2 sentences. I'm the only one of a family of 5 that got away from a little country town and went to a university. And I am passionate about inclusion and widening participation and not being a gatekeeper. But actually, as a researcher, we are in a position to gain funding to actually work with a whole range of communities. And this is an imperative, not to just go in and, do the work and then leave, but rather working with community leaders, working with Indigenous learners, with Indigenous elders, with women, with refugees, with so many of the world's disadvantaged and in crisis. And we are in a privileged situation when you're in university, but it's the money that you get, the access that you give, and then it's leaving and working together collaboratively. And that is a different kind of authoring, co-authoring. It's a beautiful question. It's a wonderful question to end on, because we should not see us be a ivory tower. I didn't get into this university to be part of an ivory tower. I got in it to disrupt it.
That's wonderful, Pam. Thank you. I think Caroline wants to say a word.
Yeah, I really appreciate the remark of the comments of Karamjit. I work in a municipality, so I work all the time with people who have all sorts of differences and handicaps and possibilities and non-possibilities. And I find every time we all get stuck in our own perception. And I just have one question I ask. I just say, how is it for you? It's so interesting. I'm always surprised. And what was also very interesting, so that's the first thing is really about fundamental curiosity about the other. And the second thing is really that you're also willing to share the burden. Yeah, so like we were working with the Bangladeshi people, I showed you the pictures with Hasna. They had really terrible situations, but they didn't speak Italian and they didn't speak English. So we were working in an online format with people who didn't speak English nor Italian. And we spent quite some time together. So it also means getting off your high horse of efficiency, or, they're all, it's, if you really open up, or to people with dementia or handicapped people, you get so much other qualities, which is fantastic. But it really demands you to question your own paradigm of efficiency and causality, and it's not all like that. And if we talk creativity, to go back to Xinwei, the creativity at the bottom of the pyramid is sometimes really mind-boggling good. And that's not acknowledged enough. It's also not listened to.
Ghislaine, you had one last comment.
Quickly to follow on from Caroline actually there and linking to Xinwei, I think it is mind-boggling, the creativity that is in everybody. And we have been seeing that, sometimes in its earliest forms and sometimes very cheesy, but coming through massively during this lockdown period, as people have been enabled by access to tools, at least, to do the same as everybody else and to have time to learn, etc. So one of the things that linking back to what Karamjit said is that, and actually is in a way where you said right at the beginning about practicing a discipline. And I think that's where in the UK we've still got unbelievably a really complex debate about academia and practice. Yeah, and so practice as research is still hugely problematic here. It's still seen as a much lower status scenario than actually just researchers in the university context, very academically surrounded. So until we can actually allow practice as research to be as genuinely supported and as good status as research, discipline research, we won't reach all the people that Carolyn's talking to, because there's no way to do it. It's not actually regarded, like you've said, Kadimit, properly and respectfully. Too much is published by academics without actually them being involving the user, involving a practice base.
That's great. Lovely. Great. So much food for thought. It's absolutely brilliant. Thank you all so much. I think that Harriet, we did have a question. I don't know if he's still there, since they haven't closed us down yet. There's somebody called Jacob. I don't know if Jacob is still there and whether he would like to put his question to us. Jacob, are you there? Maybe he's gone. Maybe he's gone. Ah, he's there. Good. Jacob, you had something you wanted to say.
Oh, yes. Am I coming through?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Excellent. So I just want to say it's wonderful to see all these ideas. I work in physics outreach, trying to do things that encourage young people to see physics as an interesting, engaging path to pursue. We do all sorts of interesting stuff. In fact, the Cambridge SciArt exhibition that Daniela mentioned was something we hosted. So that was it was great to see that that Daniela is still very much involved in these sorts of things. But my question was about misconceptions. So one of the most common misconceptions that we see from the students that come in from the schools that we target is that science isn't creative, that if you want to be creative, you have to do art, you have to do music, you have to do all these other things. And it's a bit sort of more nuts and bolts than a lot of what we've been discussing, but does the panel today have any good sort of advice on how best to demonstrate creativity in the sciences, or examples of programs that have done this well?
Who would like to address this, please?
Very quickly, just
yes,
very
Pam.
quick. I'm looking at a study at the moment, understanding teacher implicit beliefs of creativity, and the issues, the misconceptions of creativity being explicitly about art or arts and not, about science and maths and engineering. And I think where schools set up interprofessional learning teams where people are coming in and teams are being created to do something different, to do just the tiniest activity differently, but together in interprofessional learning communities, and preferably with people from the community and from industries to make it real. This is where, and it gets into teacher education, because it starts from that space as well, of seeing how can it work. I mean, Finland, teachers in secondary schools are often discipline specialists in at least 2 disciplines, like physics and visual art, or geography and English and maths. It's just commonplace for them. And so we need to really, take a leaf from Leonardo da Vinci, who did not think in silos. He did not think in silos. He was designing, he was learning through drawing. There were no subject silos, and yet he was such a specialist and an inventor and with a vision. So this is a government societal kind of structure and hierarchy that's imposed to do all sorts of class divisions and keep people doing without opportunity. So it has to change, and now it can change. This is a moment.
Thank you. So I think, sadly, it's my job to wrap it up and give an enormous kind of thank you to everybody, to Steve, to Carolyn, to Daniela, to Ghislaine, to Pam, to the respondents, Shinwei, Mary, Karamajit, Chryssie, for your fantastic AV support. Thank you so much. To the fabulous audience for joining us. And finally, to the wonderful Satinder, who has brought us all here. And if we could all have a virtual hug, we're having it right now. Thank you so much, Satinder, for making this happen. And yeah, look forward to the next laser. See you online very soon. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And good night.
Thank you. Good night. Good night. Thank you.